I'm a huge Beatles fan. I've been a diehard fan for years now, and they're my favorite band in the world. Something I was thinking about earlier, though, is how I don't really feel that way about their solo projects. Now, I love a lot of the songs that John, Paul, and George made in their post-Beatles solo careers. Even Ringo had some great tunes, but I do love a lot of their stuff, and regardless of that, for some reason, that their solo stuff just doesn't hit the same for me. It doesn't feel the same and it's not only that I'm thinking, yeah, of course they should be together as the Beatles, and that's the most perfect combination. That's hard. That's hard to work with the same people for 10 or 15 years and then continue to work with them. But it makes sense why they broke up, as far as if they just felt it had reached the end of its time in that way. But yeah, like as much as I'm like a huge fan of Wings and a lot of Paul McCartney's solo stuff and a lot of John and George's songs are great, I don't know, they just don't really, they don't do it for me as much as Beatles songs do, is all I'll say. Like I love their stuff, but you can tell how they're all so unhinged. You can tell how their songwriting, each of their solo careers shows how specific their approach is to the songs that they were making, as opposed to the combination of all of their minds together and all of them being on one project. You can hear how because they're all leaders in their solo project, like no one's really telling them no. No one's challenging them. That's the one thing that you can definitely see, from before and after the Beatles broke up, is when the Beatles were together, you can really hear it in the songs that they were pushing each other so much and that they were wanting to achieve something absolutely huge, and the reputation that the band had and that popularity only gave them more opportunities to be able to do that and really flex those creative muscles. That's why they're one of my favorite bands ever, is because of that unrestrained creativity that they would have together, or that just kind of vast amount of ideas happening that were all put together. But when they're not together, you could just hear them doing whatever they want, and that can be, that's the death of an artist, or the death of songwriting, or wanting to do something special, is when you just kind of approach, like when you don't second guess yourself, you end up limiting what is possible. That's the only thing that I've realized is how many times I've never really, I've made things that I put a lot of effort into and made as many edits as possible, and then I've created things that I literally just kind of threw together, and that was kind of the nature of it as well, was just to have as bare bones, something as bare bones as it could be. So I've done a lot of both personally, and what I can say is I always feel a lot more proud of the things that I put a lot more work into, or structured a lot more delicately and carefully. And I do think there is something to be said about not something being thrown together, but the rawness of that approach can be something interesting as well. You can hear the differences in the productions with all of their solo careers, where like Paul McCartney's songwriting and production was literally perfection, and it's so good. Paul, especially Paul McCartney's solo career, like it doesn't, like he's made so many hits and just he's given us so much good music that it's like whatever. But McCartney had the songwriting, the production was perfect. George Harrison's songwriting was really good. His production was a little overzealous maybe, and then John Lennon's songwriting was kind of impulsive, and his production was very bare bones. So you can hear that kind of difference in quality, and it just makes me wonder what would it have been like a lot of those songs if they were still together and made those songs with George Martin as well. Him producing, it would have been a completely different thing as well, I'm sure. But they all have their strengths and weaknesses. McCartney obviously having a lot of strength, and George and John just kind of doing their own thing. Like McCartney obviously stands out, like in so many ways compared to the other two, just because of how much more time we've had with him and how much he's like a workaholic. That's just who he is, and regardless, you can hear a lot of McCartney's stuff, even like him just kind of going with his gut and not necessarily. He's also the kind of songwriter that makes so much that he probably, it's like he's doing it on the fly. Like he makes it, records it, and finishes, and then he has to move on. He doesn't have time to focus on all of them individually. So even his stuff, I don't want to say some of his songs are undercooked, but you can tell how some of his songs feel like he took the easy way out. And at the same time, like we're all limited as artists or songwriters, whatever. We're all limited in a lot of ways too. Like Lennon and McCartney's songwriting as a duo is completely like it's a completely different magical beast in comparison to anything else that they had done separate. So you can hear that shift of like Lennon and McCartney's songwriting in particular is where each of their ideas feel like it's too much Lennon and McCartney. It's the combination of them, and why a lot of the Beatles songs have all these like kind of ranges of emotions. Like We Can Work It Out, I believe the story is McCartney had that main verse, try to see it my way, whatever, and then Lennon had the other part. Life is very short and there's no time. So, the combination of those parts, something as simple as that, people having different ideas and then coming together to no pun intended, coming together to make that a thing it's just always different. It's one of those things that, people have their individuality, and then if people choose to work together, it's just going to add more variety, and it's going to add more of a versatile sound. It's just what I've realized, as someone who's worked on my own for years. I can't imagine what some of my songs would have sounded like if I worked constantly with somebody else or had someone else as a producer with me as well. So my point with this is things are always a lot more special when people work together, and things are always better when people are working together. And the Beatles are just kind of proof of that. They're proof of, like, as much as we're all geniuses as songwriters, genius like musicians, their limitations are clear when we hear their music after the Beatles. And again, I love their songs. I have my opinions of it, but overall I'm just grateful that those songs got made at all, and I'm so happy that we got as much music as we can out of any of those guys. Even Lennon, dying so young. Like I'm grateful that at least for a good 5 or 6 years there, I know he took some years off of music towards the end of his life, but regardless, he was working on stuff, and he made some songs, and that's very important for people to just always be working regardless. But you can definitely you can always hear the difference, is my only thing with this. You can always hear the difference in the songwriting choices, the way the production is approached. The fact that it's not them playing together, I think, is just what bums me out more than anything. When I'm listening to a McCartney track, I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool, but it's like a bunch of other musicians that I'm like, whatever, like I don't care. It's not, it's not Ringo on drums and, one of them on bass. And, they were all such good multi-instrumentalists, the Beatles, that they were able to play on each other's songs so easily, so fucking easily, that, when you hear their solo stuff, it's just like, oh, it's just them that we really like want to hear, and then everyone else is like I don't want to say, I don't want this to sound like rude or whatever, but it's, a bunch of unknown musicians or a bunch of nobody musicians. It's like, or people that we aren't as familiar with as John, Paul, George, and Ringo. It's just, it's it's like going from a delicious steak dinner to TV dinner or something, something completely different as far as, and it's not that those musicians are bad. It's not like the bands that they had as solo artists were bad by any means. They're fantastic. They're just different. It's a different vibe. It's a different energy. It's always like, when it comes to music, how you're playing has nothing to do with the way music actually sounds. It's like your personality and your specific approach that you have to it, and that little bit of something, that magic that can't be replicated, that you bring to it as a musician, that you bring to it as a performer, whatever. You are irreplaceable. That's what that's what these things really prove to me, is like, people are not, as much as you can try to kind of replicate what somebody else does in a tribute show, or if you're like really into someone's sound and you want to try to copy that sound, you'll never be able to do it like they do, because that's, down to like somebody's DNA, and down to like just like the very nature of who we all are as human beings is what affects how our music is played. That's how a lot of the things just are in general, is like what everyone brings to the table as individuals is always the most important part of it. And I know this sounds contradicting compared to what I'm saying, working in group with groups and working in groups of people. All I mean by that is that, when the right people get together and they create something so out of this world, and something that no one could have imagined was possible, it's hard to not want more of that, or it's hard to not compare those things. That's just what I'm realizing, is that I'm gonna compare the magic that is the just epic nature of the Beatles. The Beatles are so epic and larger than life to me that anything outside of that, with anybody involved or whatever, it's just, who cares? It's just, who gives a shit? Like, not really. I'm just having a laugh when I say that. Of course, I like I said earlier, I fucking love their solo stuff. It's not Beatles. So I'm wondering, any other Beatles fans? Do any other Beatles fans feel that way? Let me know.